and prolonged as those experienced for most of 2020. The COVID crisis has served as a sort of constitutional stress test, and in doing so, it has highlighted disturbing trends that were already present before the virus struck.
Yeah, so pretty much denouncing the idea of ruled by experts, and in that, especially in respect to COVID, which is really something that, in kind of a way, I am somewhat sympathetic to, because like I do see the point, I do see the benefit of like the idea that the people should rule, and like people deserve like government can also like really encroach on physical liberties, but when there's a lockdown coming, or not when there's a tragedy coming on, for example, like the wake of 9/11, people worry about lockdowns getting too high and too fast, and like the civil liberties that were taken away in the wake of 9/11, something similar happening again. But the thing is here, this is a completely different situation entirely. And yes, I think it's completely wrong for governments to send people into lockdown without providing the necessary financial support. Like, that is criminal in my opinion. But another thing that you don't have the thing that you can't ignore is that this is a different situation. And experts really are the only people you can trust to know what they're doing without really being politically motivated in this kind of situation. And as we've seen throughout the coronavirus, James, I don't know if you agree, but politics has really paid a heavy price in this situation.
Oh, they have. I mean, I think they've paid the heaviest price in years. And I think that, honestly, if the Democratic primary was occurring during the coronavirus, I think that we probably would have seen a little bit of a different atmosphere in regards to the entire primary season and what ended up happening in the primary, because the coronavirus hit kind of later towards the primary it hit after Super Tuesday, for example, and it really didn't have that much of an effect as it would have if it came earlier. But I mean, it definitely has had a major effect on incumbent congressional leaders who have not leaders, but congressmen and congresswomen who have lost their elections, and even in the general election. I mean, the whole idea of not campaigning and just saying, "Oh, we're better than Trump, so we're just going to sit back and relax and use our high self-esteem for ourselves as a mechanism to sail us to victory," was a pretty bad mechanism that the Democrats decided to go down to in this election in many of their House seats and in some of their battleground states.
Yeah, I definitely think there should be. I mean, we could probably devote a full episode to that. But there,
I agree. We really should. Yeah, that's a whole hour discussion about the horrible.
Yeah, honestly, we should probably we should save that for kind of like when all the dust is settled there. But definitely something we can come back to there to break down that and really kind of reset a lot of the misconceptions there. And James could kind of give that full layout in the future, which I think would be very nice. But here's another fun one. We do have Justice Alito defending Masterpiece Cake Shop's Jax Phillips for refusing to bake a cake for the same-sex couple. That was in the famous case. Alito noted that the couple was offered a free cake elsewhere and then was supported by celebrity chefs. That's, again, after the case gained national notoriety, and it ended up going to the Supreme Court. So without that happening, they still would have gone home feeling ashamed and feeling like they couldn't get a cake for their own wedding because of their sexual preference. Like, just an absolutely stunning thing. This guy is he's only one vote on the Supreme Court, and he's probably the most right-wing guy in the Supreme Court for sure, but should really, I think, end the narrative that Democrats, the stupid fiction that Democrats have been holding in their head that, oh, it's a non-partisan institution of democracy, the Supreme Court is, and should be respected. It is the Democrats need to waking up. In my opinion, I think need to wake up to the realities of what the Supreme Court can really do to them.
I mean, I think that the Republicans are actually the ones who say that thing that you just said, that it's nonpartisan. The Democrats are the ones who
they say it. I think they say it, but they act very much differently. They act like they know how partisan
That's just Dianne Feinstein who does. That's just Dianne Feinstein who acts as if the Supreme Court should be a nonpartisan court. I mean, look what she did with the
But yeah, I definitely agree with
Coney
that.
Barrett.
I definitely agree with that. But I think the Republicans have, since 2010, since Mitch McConnell, have played the court and really understood the power of the court. With the Democrats' famous quote from Rahm Emanuel, Biden's chief of staff, judges aren't really worth wasting our political capital on. Like, that is the perspective from them. Like, they had to have at least, I mean, they understand, or really, I guess now more than ever, how important judges and justices are in the judiciary system in general. But I mean, it's may as well be too late at this point. Just a very, very scary speech here from Alito. I thought was worth highlighting. It happened over the weekend. Finally, I do want to get this article here to close out. We never really do this. It's a article breakdown from the New York Times opinion section. We can do Michelle Goldberg. Making the case for Democratic unity. Here's how she starts. In 2004, I went to Ohio to cover John Kerry's campaign to unseat George W. Bush. For liberals, the race felt existential. The Bush administration had lied America in a war in Iraq, where an entirely predictable insurgency was raging. His military and CIA were torturing people, and the Abu Ghraib scandal had broken out in April. Really, actually, interestingly enough, the 2004 election was really the last point of real popularity for Bush, where we had him, like, the American people completely not giving up on the Iraq war. They really got the buyer's remorse right after they put him back in. A worshipful cult of personality surrounded the president, whose administration was nakedly disdainful of the truth. Yet 4 years earlier, Bush had lost the popular vote in a race where progressives were divided and a decisive number voted third party. Surely seemed, with the right mobilization, Democrats should be able to defeat him this time. Liberal groups like launched what Matt Bai described in the New York Times Magazine as the largest get-out-the-vote effort undertaken to win a single presidential campaign. It wasn't enough. Democrats did increase the turnout, but Republicans increased theirs even more. Sound familiar? Reporting from Ohio megachurches and right-wing rallies, I could see that conservatives were motivated by the specter of gay marriage, which is a huge, huge thing that Bush was doing at the time with the Defense of Marriage Act, which had been recognized in Massachusetts a few months earlier. In the election, 11 states, including Ohio and Oregon, passed ballot initiatives against same-sex marriage. Post-election surveys showed that moral values beat out issues like Iraq and economy, in the economy as the voters' chief concern. So really what the Bush team did, because they were actually competent, they really hyped up the culture war, which in the face of a completely incompetent campaign and also a guy who voted for the Iraq war and just thought Bush wasn't doing it right in John Kerry, and just a disastrous Iraq war performance from Bush, like, what other option did they have than to turn to the culture wars? It worked very, very effectively. As I look back from 2020, let's see what the conclusions are here from Michelle. LGBTQ activists had justice on their side, obviously, even if the campaign for marriage equality caused a terrifying backlash before it triumphed. At the same time, it's understandable why Democrats, politicians like Barack Obama publicly opposed same-sex marriage in 2008, since to do otherwise risks producing permanent right-wing rule. Good policy and good politics are not the same thing. Do you agree with that principle, James?
No, I do not. That's the same exact principle that we have with the idea of bipartisanship.
I definitely see what you're saying there. Like, it's like I think honestly, you'll probably tend to win votes if you stand for something which you think is right. You know?
Yeah, because you're more genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And Obama ended up then going into his first term supporting it, in 2011. Or no, 2013, so being his second term, I apologize, his second term, when Obergefell v. Hodges was eventually passed.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing there. But it is the job of the activist left to push political limits, she writes, staking out positions that sound radical, but could, with enough work, seem like common sense in the future. These are, again, relatively popular positions and really are, I think, considered the most radical when they're explained poorly through biased media like Fox News and really pretty much any media. When there's activists and canvassers that come out and put these policies straight, like they gain support a lot of the times, and by Democrats who don't want them to happen, and Republicans who very much don't want them to happen. But in the short term, an assertive left that garners national attention can threaten political survival of Democrats who answer to a more conservative electorate. And that is the thing. Their electorate doesn't need to be conservative. They make it conservative by choice. Like, that is the primary, like, the Democrats could, if they wanted, done a base election like the Republicans have done for God knows how long. They turned out their base. They got their base worried. They got their base nervous. And they thought that gay people are going to be invading the country before long. Meanwhile, like, gay people have been living in the country and have been making the country great for literally definitely the whole existence of it. In the short term, again, this Democratic left really does and should need to push it. I mean, I agree with her that there. In a post-election interview with the Times' Ested Herndon, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez expressed frustration with those who are blaming leftists for Democrats' down-ballot losses. Progressive policies do not hurt candidates, she insisted, noting that swing district Democrats who co-sponsored Medicare for All legislation and the Green New Deal had kept their seats. So this seems like a great little preview for you to answer that claim. Fact check, James. Is that true?
I believe that is true.
Can you get a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I definitely think it is true because many of the places in which we lost this year, House races, Senate, I mean, even were run by many politicians who went down the political center. They ran down the political center and thought that would be, the best viable path for them. And there were definitely some policies, that passed. For example, look at Florida, $15 minimum wage. 2 years ago, they allowed for felons to be put onto the voter rolls. Yep. These are some very progressive ideas that for, say, like Florida, would you ever expect them to vote for Trump by 3%, but then vote for a $15 minimum wage by 18? No, I probably wouldn't. But at the same time, there definitely are some leftist policies that do cause some harm to some people. And there's just one during this time, which is just defund the police, which actually has not been able to have a very big popular standing amongst people. But besides that, the other 95% of the rather progressive policies definitely have, especially $15 minimum wage, which is arguably one of the oldest progressive policies, like not old, like many, many years ago, but in the sense of, a couple of years ago, progressives were fighting for that. And now it's starting to pick up the pace in these red states, it seems.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. It's worth highlighting here that is the accurate read. I mean, largely there are some exceptions to the rule, but that is the accurate read on what happened. But most candidates who endorsed those initiatives were in safer districts than those who didn't. When moderate Democrats like Connor Lamb and Abigail Spanberger say that left-wing slogans are poisonous in their communities, people who don't live in those communities should take them seriously. And you know what? I don't entirely think that's true. Because you got people like Debbie McCarcel-Powell. I know you like Debbie McCarcel-Powell, James, but here's the reality. They were not running ads about socialism by and large in that campaign. If you look what the NRCC was putting out, they were talking about her corruption allegations, her cronyism allegations.
Oh, no, I don't like her.
No, I don't like something.
I like her I like her more than the Republican candidates, so I don't like her.
Okay. But yeah, like that's an important thing. Like that's something that you're never going to hear any coverage about in the media. Like that's what they're actually talking. It was not the defund the police line. It was not how socialist.
Oh, yeah, no, not for her. Not for her, Spencer. Though.
Yeah, it was not about. It was not about.
Her husband's Ukrainian fraud case. Like her husband was working for a financial bureau.
Yeah, that's I think that's what it was.
No, I'm just saying for certain areas it did. Gil Cisneros, for example, who actually, by the way, he wasn't a very progressive person, but he definitely was not a moderate. He definitely was liberal. I mean, for example, he did sign on to Medicare for All, but he did not sign on to a Green New Deal, which is why I don't really know what to label him, to be quite frank.
Did he win?
But no, he lost by like 2,000 votes in Orange County. Huh. But it is a Republican plus 6 district. But then again, I can't say that he did bad given the fact of his district.
But you also have you do have people like Katie Porter in similar districts winning.
Yeah, but that's a less Republican district. And the other thing is, Katie Porter's